Hello, everyone. My name is Louise, and I'm quickly sharing with you a little bit of supplemental information, or maybe a different packaging of the highlights of Learning Unit 1 for COM3713. I'm quickly going to take you through the most important bits of this learning unit, but as you have gotten to know in our earlier sessions together, this unit is introductory, and although important for bringing you into the learning unit, not crucial for assignment 1 that you are currently working on. All right, now what is this learning unit about? Now, by this level of study, you should already know quite a bit about organizational communication or communicating in organizational settings. For instance, we know from as early as your COM1513 that organizations and communications are forever interconnected. And we know about some specialist fields in organizational communication. And now in this module, we need to look a little bit more at the complex relationships between scholarship, application, and what it means to be a human in the world today, and what all those three things say to one another in the context of organizational communication. COM3713 is the module in which we do this. We deal with some more abstract and complex theoretical concepts. We look at the complex relationships between scholarship and theory, and professional practice of organizational communication, and then also, the rest of who we are as humans. Learning Unit 1 specifically sets the scene for the module. We do that firstly by looking at how we say temporal, that means historical and present times, how over time, so temporal, and spatial, this means geographically, maybe, how spatial contexts come together in our lives when it comes to organizational settings. And then we refresh our current understanding of organizational communication and compare that to some current theoretical foundations of the discipline, as well as new developments in theoretical thinking. Now, this is done in Learning Unit 1, but I'm not going to cover that. That is covered by you taking action and completing the two self-assessment activities to catch up on what you know about organizational communication and what are the newer developments you might be interested in. I'm going to look in a bigger, a broader sense at the learning unit. Now, the image you see on your screen depicts two ways, two recent ways we have been using to describing our complex, ever complex, more and more complex world. Now, VUCA is the older of the two concepts, and we are going to focus on Barney, which is the more recent way or recent conception that we know of. And Barney is a framework for sense making, and it provides us with some tools or a lens to make sense of what it feels like to live in the world today. And Barney breaks down into the four letters of the acronym. B stands for brittle, A for anxious, N for non-linear, and I for incomprehensible. So the complexity that Barney represents are all about, in our world of today, we are all connected. We are connected via technology. We are geographically connected with international travel. We are economically, politically, and socially connected right throughout the world with complex kind of ties between different countries, regions, world systems, international business, and so many more ways. And this connections, this interconnectedness of our world that makes it quite complex to live and study organizational comms and understand organizations of the moment is also not just connected in the now. It is also connected to our pasts. And we are going to use this Barney model to explore how present day realities of the world collide with our histories by means of looking at some examples. Now let's first look at the B. The B stands for brittleness, and the B in Barney, meaning that our interconnected world is so connected that it creates vulnerable and brittle systems that that even if it looks like these enormous international systems are working well, they are vulnerable because if something breaks down, the effects are felt worldwide. And these systems are often enormous, and if they break down, there's no safety nets in many cases. We have no plan B for these big breakdowns that we see happening now. One of the, maybe it is not so new anymore. There's been so many things happening in the world, but a good example to show how this breakdown can happen, like economically, is when in 2021 a single ship blocked the Suez Canal. And that caused disruptions. I can show you just a little bit of a graphic on the screen. The fact that the Suez Canal was blocked, and it caused just one ship to make a mistake and this blockage to occur. It caused disruptions in international trade. The blockage was there for 6 days. And in 6 days, the world economy suffered greatly because of the whole connection of the world economy. And by just one channel of moving goods up and down in the world from one area to another, just one week of one canal being blocked caused an enormous effect in the world. It delayed 400 ships and led to losses of over, they say, $80 million of economic activity just in this time that it was blocked. And it caused things like raises in the oil price and other major problems for the world. And we are interconnected like this in the Suez Canal example, like where one problem can have repercussions for everyone all over the world. But to show you also that our interconnections are also not just now, but also have to do with how those world systems originated. So it sits in history. And here I want to talk quickly about an example from Zambia. Now, Zambia's economy is basically centered on one thing, and that is the export of copper. So Zambia is connected to the world economy because they trade internationally via export, and the world and the global economics are like these complex commodity markets that they are dealing with, and much of how it's going in Zambia's economy is determined by things like the price of copper, and the long and complex value chains that the minerals industry is known for. These value chains make it a very complex and very brittle system, because there are differences in currencies between countries, and we're talking about all kinds of taxes and policies and rights that is connected all over the world when we're talking about the import and export of minerals like copper. Now, but in Zambia's case, history is still very much with us, and it impacts the Zambia's vulnerability within this bigger world system. Because, for instance, Zambia and the Congo-Kinshasa region, as you can see on the image on the screen, have 10% of the world's copper reserves. That's quite a substantial proportion of it. And for Zambia, 75% of the economy earns what they earn is coming from copper. So that meaning that Zambia is so dependent on the single mineral, and they are economically so vulnerable, because even though they have a decent proportion of the world's copper and are a big player, their economy is so dependent on it that if something happens in the copper industry or in the minerals industry to disrupt or break down that part of the world economy, they will suffer more greatly because of this dependence on this single commodity. And the history comes in there because this system, this economy of Zambia that's dependent on this one mineral, that system was put in place there under British colonial rule, because the British wanted to capitalize on the mineral wealth of that area, and the infrastructure and the trade systems and many of the economic rules that preceded today's systems were put in place to benefit the, let's say, the colonizers of the time, and to serve the needs of the West, where the copper was going. And much of those systems are still in place today. And we still see that in so many ways. We still see that African people are exploited for labor, that African natural resources are overused, and profits come to people that are seldom the African nations themselves. And this ongoing dependence of many African countries on their former colonies, that are now world superpowers, all of this has speaks of this interconnectedness between the current and the past, but it also shows us that in this big brittle system of today, many Africans are in a more vulnerable position when something goes wrong. Oh, I think I already. Oh, there I am. Is another image to show the minerals and metals, right? Like some gives you some glance about what it looks like for the rest of Africa, and you can see that this is a general kind of thing for African countries. Many of us are dependent on minerals and metals and exports of things, and it shows that it's not only Zambia is now one example, but it's not only Zambia, and that all of this coming from our history makes us doubly vulnerable in today's already brittle world systems, because we entered into them on a kind of a back foot and in a dependent position from the beginning. Now the next and the A for Barney is anxiety, anxious. So our Barney world is known for experiences of concern and anxiety. Now we see this in health crises like COVID, natural disasters. We've seen so many in South Africa in recent years, like big flooding. We see it in further afield in enormous storms and cyclones and about tropical storms that cause havoc in the world. And we are generally relatively more scared, and we end up expecting the worst when we hear there's been a lot of rain in a certain province or a storm is coming, because we have seen that those disasters and crises can have enormous effects on us. And also the media. Today, we are all connected via technologically technology, and that media that we are spreading, the news that we are spreading to one another, spreads that anxiety in society, like in the form of bad news and fear mongering, and even things like misinformation and fake news that are concepts that are part of our current vocabulary when we speak about the news media. Now, we can see this for ourselves in our workplaces. I personally feel more stress and anxiety at work than ever. At maybe recent disasters like COVID and like the devastating floods that we often experience in many of our rural areas make us internalize the uncertainties of life, and constant change and crisis situations are becoming part of how we live. Now I can see and feel it in the workplace. The Barney thinkers say that this concern and anxiety might make us more passive at work because we are uncertain. It might change the way we deal with risks in organizational settings. So we could be potentially more risk averse because we are scared of disaster, and we don't want to be brave and take chances to progress or innovate at work or as organizations, because we stop believing that we have any kind of control over the future. So that negativity and passivity have a negative impact on how we make decisions, how we innovate, how our creativity works in the workplace, and how satisfied people feel at work, and so on. Those are all organizational communication, topics. But we can just as easily argue that history is also present in this, in how we experience concern and anxiety. Now, I will tell you a story. I have it highlighted on the screen. It's on a concept called fake news, or like fake news or misinformation via media, via social media. Very often, we all know this concept, but this academic, Prof. Fokule Adebisi, she has an angle on this story that I found quite interesting, and she speaks to it from a historical injustice side. Now, we speak post-truth world, we deal with fake news, and we have no control over the ideologies that underlie many technological communication developments and trends in the media. And in a blog post that I'm going to show and read to you now, this prof links it to being African and having the history that many Africans have. She says that, you can read it on the screen, but she said that post-truth it's not new. It might be a new and trending concept in the bigger world, but to Africans, fake news is nothing new, and the same is true for many people from areas in the global south. She writes it so well. I can't actually tell you the story how in the way she writes it. So to illustrate, let's read some of it together. She says, I often start decolonial reflections with a picture of the river Niger. Now, in her blog, there is a picture. She has had many names over many years. This river has for thousands of years served as a transport system of animals, fish, birds, and plants' life. Her ebb and flow have marked times for generations. She's seen empires rise and fall around her, and she still flows. And millions of bodies are hidden under her waters. But for those who go to school around her, the only thing they are taught about her is that her name has been given to her by Leo Africanus, an Andalusian diplomat. No other names are taught. They are taught that she was discovered by Mungo Park, a Scottish explorer, though those who lived with her, bathed in her, communed with her, have never declared her ever missing. This, I believe, illustrates how we have always lived in a post-truth world. We have never had shared objective standards of truth, and those who live in what is designated to be the global south have always tasted the waters of post-truth. We have bathed in it, been immersed in it. What is startling to us is that the frontiers of post-truth are moving north, and those frontiers are moving very rapidly and being dispersed widely by varying formats, such as social media. I wanted you to see the story, to see that the world are feeling worried and anxious because of things like news that we can't trust, misinformation that are being spread. That is nothing new to people who come from the global south. The next letter in Barney is non-linear, meaning that non-linearity, specifically when it comes to cause and effect. So it's inequalities in relations between causes and effects. And we feel a non-linear, unequal change and the impact thereof in our Barney world. This trait means that there's no alignment. Like sometimes a small action can have a huge effect, or actions far away can have an effect here locally, or actions of the past can have an effect today, and so on. In terms of time, we can speak of things like cancel culture as a good example. Somebody can be cancelled today for something that they have said years ago. They made a statement some years ago that is now regarded to be not politically correct, and that statement can cause their cancellation. So it's a big effect for a small action of years ago. I'm not very in tune with actual South African celebrities that got cancelled, but for instance, like our Boere Tannie Helen Zille is one of the examples of people who are often in trouble on social media because she speaks in a certain way that is sometimes regarded as out of tune, and she's received some of this cancel culture. She's received some of the tail end of that because of things she said on social media. I also know some international stories and some closer to home. Like I see stories about Burna Boy, Buje Binkwa, Babes Motumo, Lady Zamar. I heard about Katlego Mabu because we went to university together. You know, I was a little bit tuned in. Ooh, now pause the slide. I am tuned into to what happened to him, and I remember something about Jub Jub, but honestly my examples are not very complete. But we see it all the time. Celebs get in trouble for things they said sometimes long ago, sometimes just in a single tweet or a single post, and the effects of cancel culture is quite severe in some cases. Now, the inequality of this is also felt differently between different peoples, right? So the cause and effect is often geographically bound. So some areas are more prone to natural disasters, and the people of some areas will suffer more than people from elsewhere. If there's, for instance, a flood in a well-developed area, people can be much safer than if there is a flood in a rural area with limited resources or limited alternative places to flee to. So the benefits of global business are, for instance, greater greater for the former colonizers than they are for the former colonies where it comes to international business. And something like the harms of the COVID disaster is greater. This is something, an example that's been well published and well debated, that that the harms being done by COVID was suffered greater in the international Black community than for white people, because generally of poverty and infrastructure that made it more difficult for poor people to access vaccines and so on. And Prof. Stella Nkomo wrote on the disparities of these type of disparities in the COVID years. She said that the effect of the coronavirus was greater on Black people and lesser on white people. And along the same lines, fear and anxiety around global health disasters might be generally understood after COVID, but understanding the specific human experiences of life, for instance, in South Africa, is necessary to appreciate the desperation and hopelessness caused by poverty, crime, and other struggles that come together with something like COVID. And that is not like, so COVID wasn't, the effects of COVID wasn't felt fairly, and the cause and effect wasn't equally spread amongst different peoples. On the screen, you see a little collage I made about COVID inequalities, and some of the expressions that we saw in the text. Now there are links, there used to be links between these different Black Lives Matters and those clickable links that I can't show to you right now. But for instance, we started talking about COVID being linked to systemic racism. And there's this saying that says viruses don't discriminate, but we do. And then some article titles were, why did more Black Americans die? And then we all know that the Black Lives Matter movement came during COVID, and we saw those things collide in ways to show us that there's inequality in today's world, in how certain enormous disasters affect different types of people. Now, the last letter of Barney is the I, that stands for incomprehensible. Now we are talking about incomprehensible complexity. Our Barney world brings economic systems and power relations and decisions by political leaders that baffle us, and technologies that are so complex that most of us don't understand it. And technology here is a good example. Because most of us don't get it, right? The algorithms, big data, AI, it's too much. For me, at least, it's too much. We don't have good information to work with, but at the same time, we are overloaded with information from all over, brought to us via technology. And just like other present-day complexities, the incomprehensibility of technology is also bound to our histories. And there's this one example I want to tell you about to show what I mean when I say this. Incomprehensibility of technology are, let's say, more dangerous and pose more difficulties for some than for others. And one of those problems we call algorithmic bias. The algorithms that drive our AI tools are racially biased, and the technological bias can spread. This bias can spread to and contribute to further injustices, exclusions based on race, and a reproduction of historical race-based mistreatments very rapidly and on a big scale. And countering and changing this is difficult, as the technology is so complex that we struggle to know what we are fighting against. This problem is getting some attention and some cool people are doing research in the area, I'm going to play you the first couple of minutes of an interesting TED talk on the topic of algorithmic bias to show you how that bias, our racial bias, is built into technological development.
Hello, I'm Joy, a poet of code on a mission to stop an unseen force that's rising, a force that I called the coded gaze, my term for algorithmic bias. Algorithmic bias, like human bias, results in unfairness. However, algorithms like viruses can spread bias on a massive scale at a rapid pace. Algorithmic bias can also lead to exclusionary experiences and discriminatory practices. Let me show you what I mean. Hi, camera. I've got a face. Can you see my face? No glasses face? You can see her face. What about my face? Well, I've got a mask. Can you see my mask? So how did this happen? Why am I sitting in front of a computer in a white mask trying to be detected by a cheap webcam? Well, when I'm not fighting the coded gaze as a poet of code, I'm a graduate student at the MIT Media Lab. And there I had the opportunity to work on all sorts of whimsical projects, including the Aspire Mirror, a project I did so I could project digital masks onto my reflection. So in the morning, if I wanted to feel powerful, I could put on a lion. If I wanted to be uplifted, I might have a quote. So I used generic facial recognition software to build the system, but found that it was really hard to test it unless if I wore a white mask. Unfortunately, I've run into this issue before. When I was an undergraduate at Georgia Tech studying computer science, I used to work on social robots. And one of my tasks was to get a robot to play peekaboo, a simple turn-taking game where partners cover their face and then uncover it saying peekaboo. The problem is peekaboo doesn't really work if I can't see you, and my robot couldn't see me. But I borrowed my roommate's face to get the project done, submitted the assignment, and figured, you know what, somebody else will solve this problem. Not too long after, I was in Hong Kong for an entrepreneurship competition. The organizers decided to take participants on a tour of local startups. One of the startups had a social robot, and they decided to do a demo. The demo worked on everybody until it got to me, and you can probably guess it. It couldn't detect my face. I asked the developers what was going on, and it turned out we had used the same generic facial recognition software. Halfway around the world, I learned that algorithmic bias can travel as quickly as it takes to download some files off of the internet. So what's going on? Why isn't my face being detected? Well, we have to look at how we give machines sight. Computer vision uses machine learning techniques to do facial recognition. So how this works is you create a training set with examples of faces. This is a face, this is a face, this is not a face. And over time, you can teach a computer how to recognize other faces. However, if the training sets aren't really that diverse, any face that deviates too much from the established norm will be harder to detect, which is what was happening to me.
All right, now, just like the past and the present collide in all different ways, and specifically now in our context for African and South African lives and organizations, so do our histories and our current realities impact research and knowledge production and education and all other parts of scholarly work. And I want to move to that part of the learning unit now. Now, knowledge is used by all of us all the time, right? We navigate life, we make decisions, we learn in our everyday lives, making use of knowledge, gaining knowledge and changing our minds, making decisions based on things we know, knowledge we have. And there are so many forms of knowledge. There's like common sense, there's like practical know-how, there's like wisdom and spiritual insight, all different forms of knowledge. And scientific knowledge or scholarly knowledge is but one such form. It's quite a specialized form of knowledge, and that's the one we deal with here in an institution like a university. We differentiate scholarship from other types of knowledge by saying scholarship is the systematic, rigorous engagement with knowledge in specialized fields or areas. And we usually see things like theory, research, application, and formal education as part of scholarship. Now, this scholarship also asks us to think critically about the quality and the moral standing of scientific work, so to ensure this systematique and rigor that we define scholarship as. Now, it is here that we can see how the past and present complexities and contexts are also important for scholarship. Our commitment, us being scholars, you being maybe emerging scholars or future scholars, our commitment to knowledge means that there must be some coherence between our ways of being and doing and knowing. That is part of this rigor and systematique, is this coherence in how we do things. Now, practically, it comes down to two things. The first is that there must be a good fit between scholarship and the real world. Now, the human and social sciences are about studying the real world and solving problems in the real world. So coherence depends on us doing work that is useful and relevant and appropriate for our world. That makes good sense to me, is that there must be coherence between the scholarship and what goes on in the world. The second thing is that there must be a good fit between scholarship and what happens in our scholarly communities themselves. Because as scholars, we share certain responsibilities in terms of how we go about this rigorous and systematic manner of going about knowledge. So that comes down to things like our theories, interpretations, styles of reasoning, and methods must be consistent with our philosophical or ideological stances and the intentions of our efforts to do scholarly work. And also within our specialized areas, we adhere to certain rules and conventions and requirements that we share inside of our specific scholarly communities. As you can see here, the requirements for coherence applies to all aspects of scholarship. But for the purposes of this module, I'm going to look a bit more at coherence as it applies to organizational communication theory, specifically, this theoretical part of scholarly practice. Now, because we deal with theoretical and more abstract philosophical concepts in this module, I'll focus on that side of scholarship when we look at critical engagement with knowledge to ensure that the quality of our scholarship is what it's supposed to be, and also show you how that comes together with the past, brings together the past and the here and now. Now, in the first place, what is a theory? Theories are at the heart of scholarship. And we use theories to arrange and integrate scientific knowledge on a specific subject over time. A theory is a set of relational concepts or principles or explanations that help us understand a specific phenomena, and this guides our intellectual practices when it comes to that phenomenon. And what makes a good theory, we can base it on the previous slides' ideas of being a good fit with reality and being a good fit or being coherent with scholarship itself and our scholarly way of doing things. Now, what makes a theory a good fit for lived realities? That depends on things like how well a theory responds to what's happening in the world, who it's for, what it's for, and what contribution that theory can make to the world. that is one of the ways we can determine this fit. For example, ORCOM scholars contribute to professional practice, and the contribution of applied scholarship is easy to see because research results that can be applied to practical issues, like they intend to address practical issues, and then the theoretical contribution can be made. The link between theory and application and professional practice can be made to show how that theory you used can fit into the real world. And another example is like in social sciences, we think also in African and South African social and human sciences, we are at the moment thinking that scholarship is supposed to serve society and also consider a variety of social players. Now, in organizational communications context, the theory can, for instance, help organizations be more responsible to the communities they are embedded in, and be cognizant and serve their stakeholders, including groups like their employees and pressure groups like labor unions and civil society groups, and other groups like their suppliers and maybe government policy makers and so on. So in organizational comms, there are many ways that we can serve by means of having the correct theories or working in the correct theoretical way. We can fit better our theories with realities of life at the moment and of where we are here in South Africa. The last example related to the previous is that scholarship can contribute to transformation. And in South Africa and many other countries from the global south, change is imperative. And then the quality of our theories are also then determined by their ability to inform transformative and activistic scholarship. This is exactly the reason why it's important that it's happening here at UNISA, that we are thinking about, talking about Africanizing, decolonizing, that we are re-looking our theories through an African decolonial lens, that you will see right through this degree. Now, what makes a quality theory is also one that can give direction to our discipline. This is the other part, how well a theory works for the scholarly community. And fields like ours have so many different ways of conceptualizing communication, and the problems of the problems we can make research problems of, the meaning different ways of thinking about how we speak about it, how we practically study it. Now, for a theory, for instance, the coherence means that a theory, whether you use it or you critique it or you comment on it or you contribute to it, should speak to the tradition of that theory before the work can be declared scientifically rigorous. So you cannot expect to make a quality contribution to the theoretical conversation in our discipline without recognizing these internal consistencies between theoretical traditions, philosophical traditions, and disciplinary conventions and things you are speaking into when you are working with theory. Now, if we are aware that how we study and practice organizational communications and our lives as humans are connected, and if we know that scholarly knowledge is human knowledge, that scholarship should fit with our lives and the realities of being human, and then we understand something about the importance of scientific work. The importance of scientific work also being systematic and coherent, and work that is done according to shared rules and conventions, in order to be of value as scholarly knowledge. So to tie in with the first half of Learning Unit 1, we can see how fragile and complex systems of global business, how fragile those systems are. And we can see that many African economies and African people suffer more when such systems break down. We can see that things like misinformation, fake news, non-truths being spread in the world. And we can see that many Africans has long felt what it feels like to be lied to and about. We can see the misalignment between cause and effect in the world, and we can see that inequality in who benefits most from doing business in the world and who suffers the most when disaster strikes. We all struggle to understand the complicated technologies of our time and the complex economic, political dynamics of the world. And we can see that there might be less benefits for Black people from complex technological developments, or maybe it might be riskier for us not to understand technology or business, because historically we know why people are kept in the dark about things like economics and politics and development. In all of the examples, we see the connections between organizations like businesses and bigger economic systems, communication like the fake news, misinformation, and the effects they have on human lives. And we can see that our histories of oppression still affects us and will keep affecting us negatively if we do not change. And that is why this whole degree is centered on critical, decolonial, Afrocentric, and indigenous scholarship. In our context, we must realize that we can't successfully study or practice organizational communication without seriously looking into and changing, if necessary, our specialized form of human knowledge that we call communication studies, so that it fits with our lives and can contribute to the betterment of our lives. And we must realize that seriously looking into and changing scholarship should also mean systematically and rigorously engaging with the theories we use as building blocks for our scholarship. And that is why this module is about critical organizational communication, to help you build a theoretical basis. And that basis is intended to serve you as future academics and future professionals that, number one, respects the existence of multiple ways of being and knowing and doing as we create or construct those realities and means of being and doing and knowing. We construct those ourselves so that we can become professionals and scholars that contribute to scholarship that is critically considering the value of existing and new theories and other scholarly works. That we are aware and critical of the unequal spread of resources and privileges in society, in organizations too, in our case, and the historical power differences between people that created those unequal spread, and the complex power structures that keep it like that, and that are aware of how brave we need to be to question and critique and dismantle and transform all of that does not respond to the needs and the realities of African communities, African employees, African organizations in a fair and ethical manner. And that's it for Learning Unit 1. If you want to take up the opportunity to refresh your memory on what you learned in past modules in ORGCOM, or to get a good grasp on ORGCOM, what level of ORGCOM knowledge you should have by now, and catch up on some interesting recent developments in the discipline, spend some time on the self-assessment activities 1.2a and b, and talk to me if you have any questions in that regard. Goodbye for now.